Man saves elderly lion, abandoned by his pride. But what happens next is shocking. Across the parched Kalahari landscape, I drove my worn Land Rover, the radio crackling with static. It was my third consecutive day tracking reports of an injured male lion on the eastern boundary of the Okavango Delta. The May heat was relentless, dust coating every surface despite the closed windows. My satellite phone buzzed. Mikosi, one of our local trackers, had spotted something. Daniel, he's about 4 kilometers east of your position. Bad shape. Looks like he's been pushed out by the Sable Plains Pride, ribs showing, left hind leg injured. Hurry. Adjusting my course, I scanned the horizon while sweat trickled down my neck. After 12 years working at the Northern Botswana Wildlife Conservation Center, I'd seen my share of lions pushed from their prides, younger males challenging the patriarch, injuries rendering them unable to hunt, natural, if brutal, selection. But something in Mikosi's voice told me this case was different. Exactly where Mikosi had described, the lion lay motionless in the shade of a lone acacia tree. Even from 50 yards away, I could see the hollows between his ribs, the patchy mane, the labored breathing. Male lions rarely survive long after being forced from their pride. Without the collective hunting power of the group, they starve quickly, especially when injured. I radioed back to base. Found him. Male, approximately 15 years old, severely malnourished, visible injury to left rear leg. I'm going to tranquilize and bring him in. Negative, Daniel, came Dr. Abiola's voice. We're at capacity with the drought victims. The board won't approve resources for an elderly male. Document and let nature take its course. Through my binoculars, I stared at the lion. Slightly, he lifted his head, his golden eyes finding mine across the distance. Something in that gaze, not just pain, but a quiet dignity, made my decision for me. Connections breaking up. I'll update when I return to base. I lied, switching off the radio. The protocols, I knew them. I'd written half of them. But I also knew I couldn't leave him there to die slowly under the merciless sun. This wasn't about conservation mathematics or resource allocation. This was about basic decency. The tranquilizing went smoothly. Barely having energy to react, the lion accepted the dart in his gaunt flank. Up close, the situation was worse than I'd initially assessed. Deep lacerations across his face and neck showed where younger males had attacked him. His left hind leg bore puncture wounds, likely from a failed hunt. Most concerning was his weight. I estimated he'd lost a third of his body mass. Hang in there, old man, I murmured, checking his vitals before beginning the delicate process of loading him into the vehicle. I named him Tao, lion in Setswana. Simple, but it felt wrong to transport him without acknowledging his identity somehow. Tense was the drive back to my research outpost, every bump in the dirt track potentially jostling his injuries. My outpost wasn't the main conservation center, but a small research station I'd established 5 years earlier to study pride dynamics. It had basic veterinary equipment, enough, I hoped, to stabilize him. By sunset, Tao lay on the concrete floor of my equipment shed, and 4 drip providing fluids while I cleaned his wounds. The leg wasn't broken, but had deep, badly infected punctures. His temperature was dangerously high. I administered antibiotics, cleaned each wound methodically, and covered him with a light blanket as the desert night brought plummeting temperatures. This is either the dumbest or kindest thing you've ever done, I told myself, setting up a camping cot beside him for the night. Around 3 a.m., Tao's breathing changed, becoming more labored. I jerked awake, fumbling for my headlamp. His massive chest heaved with effort, each breath a battle. For a moment I thought I'd failed, that after everything he would die anyway on the cold concrete floor of my shed instead of under the African sky where he belonged. I placed my hand on his chest, feeling the erratic heartbeat. Don't give up, Tao. Not yet. As if in response, his eyes opened, finding mine in the dim light. No aggression, no fear, just awareness, recognition. I'd worked with captive-born lions, conservation relocation cases, even cubs orphaned by poachers, but I'd never seen a wild lion look at a human the way Tao looked at me in that moment. It wasn't anthropomorphism or sentimentality talking. In that gaze was a consciousness, an acknowledgement passing between two living beings. I stayed with my hand on his chest, monitoring each breath until gradually his breathing steadied. By dawn, his fever had broken. The next week passed in a blur of wound care, antibiotics, and slowly increasing portions of raw meat. I kept my activities at the outpost minimal, reporting to headquarters that I was tracking migration patterns. Not technically a lie, as I was documenting nearby herds during my brief absences from Tao's side. Dr. Abiola would have my job if she discovered I'd directly contradicted her orders. But with each passing day, as Tao's strength incrementally returned, I became more certain I'd made the right choice. By day 10, Tao was able to stand shakily and move short distances around the enclosed space. I expanded his area to include a small outer pen with patches of shade and sun where he could feel the earth beneath his paws. Calmly, he accepted my presence, watching me with those intelligent eyes as I changed his bandages or brought food. No longer just tolerating my proximity, he seemed to welcome it, a realization that both thrilled and concerned me. Imprinting was dangerous. He needed to remain wild if he had any chance of survival. On the morning of day 14, I arrived with his breakfast, a portion of impala from a recent road casualty, to find him standing alert at the edge of the pen, staring intently at the horizon. I followed his gaze to see 3 female lions observing us from approximately 200 yards away. My breath caught. Females from the Sable Plains Pride, the same group that had expelled him. They shouldn't be this close to my outpost, this far from their usual territory. Something had drawn them here. Subtly, Tao's posture changed, not aggressive, but more upright, dignified, despite his still gaunt frame. He made a soft chuffing sound I hadn't heard from him before. The females watched for several long minutes before retreating into the bush. I turned to Tao, who continued staring at the spot where they disappeared. "Friends of yours?" I asked quietly, setting down the meat. Instead of immediately eating as usual, Tao approached me slowly, his massive head level with my chest. We stood facing each other, man and lion, neither moving. Then, with deliberate gentleness, he pressed his forehead against my shoulder for the briefest moment before turning to his meal. The lump in my throat took me by surprise. It wasn't just that he hadn't killed me. It was the unmistakable communication in the gesture, a connection I couldn't explain and hadn't sought, but which now seemed as solid as the ground beneath us. I didn't know then how that moment would change everything, not just for Tao and me, but for our understanding of these magnificent predators. I couldn't have predicted the extraordinary events that would unfold over the coming months, or how the story of a man and a dying lion would eventually reach millions worldwide. All I knew as I watched him eat with gradually returning strength was that something remarkable had begun, and that saving this lion might ultimately change the course of my life in ways I couldn't yet imagine.